Awesome. The recording has started. All right. We good to go? Perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, or if you're new here, hello. My name is Olivia, and currently I'm a fourth year at UCLA studying anthropology. But by the time this video goes live, myself and my guest here are both going to be graduated. And we were actually just contemplating the implications of that thing, this impending thing happening, which is kind of fun. But before I dive into some of my interview questions, Derrick, do you want to introduce yourself to the people watching? Just anything about you, your major, anything that you would want people to know.
Okay. Hi everybody. I am Derrick. That's my English name. My Chinese name is Hong Tao Liu. And I am, as with Olivia, a fourth year senior UCLA anthropology student that I'm graduating next week as well. So yeah, it's a pleasure to, be able to chat about it and be a guest of Olivia here.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And again, thank you just so much for being here. It's so fun I talked to Elena in the last video, and it's just so fun to hear everyone talk. Because obviously I know you guys already, but it's fun to hear everyone talk about their experiences with anthro that are different from mine. So my first question, which I'm actually, again, so excited to hear how everybody stumbled into it, is how did you learn about the anthropology major? And then what about it made you actually want to study it?
Yeah, mine is a bit of a convoluted, well, not convoluted, but a bit of you could say it's not straightforward.
It
My
never
my
is.
first yeah, my first experience with anthropology is in community college. I went to Santa Monica College for my first 2 years, and there I took intro anthro classes as part of the general education. I'm not entirely sure why I picked one of the anthro classes because back then I had no idea what it was. Um, and I did take that class. It was Introduction to Culture, very foundational anthro class. And I just remember that I found it interesting, but also just really confusing. After the
Mhm.
class, I would talk to the people about what I learned, um, and I found it interesting and all, but I just couldn't explain exactly what anthropology was about. Later on, what happened was that we also had a counseling class that basically about career, and then for part of that class we have to interview someone about their profession. So I just chose to interview my anthropology professor at community college, and I talked to him more about anthropology as a field, and he explained to me more about it, and that got me really interested. However, I did not commit to the major because for my entire undergraduate community college experience, I was actually undecided. I didn't have a major, I was just taking classes I liked. It wasn't actually until I was about to transfer, um, when I was about to apply to transfer, which for UCLA is a year ahead of that, I realized I didn't really have a major. I don't know what to transfer to. So I was looking up the UCLA, different transfer requirements or the classes they needed, and I just saw that anthropology. I'm already done with most of the requirements. I just have to
Mhm.
take 3 classes, and then I'm ready to transfer to UCLA Anthro. So I just took all 3 classes at one at community college. I was literally between room, 2 classes in one room and another class in the next room. These 2 classrooms was just my whole career, just in those 2 rooms. Um, and I finished them all, and then I applied to transfer to UCLA Anthro, and that's how I got here. And so really, it was a last minute decision.
And then how do you think that played out? Because obviously that was the convenient thing. And then would you say that, and no wrong answers, that you are satisfied with what you've come to learn about anthropology? Are you happy that you majored in it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I think about these things all the time with regards to what I want to do in the future, but also with regards to what I would have done um
Mm.
if I had picked a different major. But honestly, I just learned so much in the last couple of years being at UCLA Anthro that I don't think other majors would have provided me with that kind of understanding or knowledge. I'm sure I learned a lot of other things, but I just feel like I would be missing out on something
Yeah.
that I wouldn't want to trade it for anything else.
Yeah, I had the same
I love it.
experience. I love it too. And I think it's the one of the most well-rounded degrees that you can take. I just feel like you learn a lot of very like real world things. Like I'm in these classes all the time and I'm like, oh, that matters, or that actually impacts how I make decisions moving forward, like in life. And I'm like, I just don't think if I did another major, I would have had the same experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's just crazy. So I love hearing these kinds of stories because for some people it's like out of convenience, or for others it's like, oh, I learned about it in a high school class and I wanted to know more. But I think what really matters is you get to the end, right? And it's how do you feel about it now? So I'm so glad to hear that you do like it, because I'm sure there's people who have like differing opinions. So it's great to hear that you
of
have
course. And
enjoyed it. My next question is, again, I'm familiar with obviously you and your research project, but I'm curious which subfield, like more broadly of anthropology, is the one that calls out to you the most and why? Like I could guess, but I don't actually know the answer to
I
that.
want I want to hear what you think. Like well, if you were to take a guess, what would you say?
I feel like in the context of our research program, I would guess like cultural or sociocultural, but also I feel like what I know about you, I feel like you're also really drawn to biological anthropology just based on some of the conversations that we've had. But again, I don't know. So I would love to hear which one actually like grabs you.
Yeah. Um, Actually, you had a good guess there.
Oh,
It's
yay.
bioanthro, I would say, that really, I think, just calls out to me. Like,
Mhm.
if I had to pick one, that would be the most. I love all the subfields.
Mhm.
Um, I don't pick favorites, as parents would say. I don't pick favorites, but if I have to pick a favorite, it would be bioanthro,
Mhm.
followed by like theology, and then cultural, and then maybe I'm gonna get I'm gonna get culture. I'm sure people would hack me having my list of perfect. But
You
I
got it
like bio
all.
I like bioanthro a lot. I took with you. I took a few of these bioanthro classes:
Mhm.
evolutionary medicine, evolutionary psychology. I just found the topics so engaging. Um, that like it's one of those few classes where in anthro you have to do a lot of. In those classes, it's no different. We read papers every week, but that's just one of those classes where I could happily on my own. Don't even need to tell me to do it. I would myself because I found the topic reading the discussion on this connection between human culture and behavior today that we see and things that we take for granted, things that we see all the time, and the roots that they have in like evolutionary history, which we're talking about tens and hundreds of thousands of years. Really, really fascinating. So that's something that I really wow. Um, I think yeah, like archaeology as well. Just these kind of fields that provides you with this really like solid ground for you to work with. I like that. So that's something that I really enjoy. Yeah, but I
Yeah,
would say that's
I'm so like again, I thought I knew, I don't remember when, but we've had a conversation and I remember you saying that you really loved biological anthropology, and that combined with which classes that we've had in common. I like had a feeling that that might be the case. So then that leads me to ask you, why did you want to do like a sociocultural research project over maybe like archaeology or biological anthropology?
I think it's mm, I would say a combination of factors, right? One, it's one of the first topics that came to mind, and
Mm.
um, I would say that when I was looking up Lemelson and the application process as the proposal at the date, I was suddenly thinking, oh shoot, I don't have too much time, so best work on it quickly. So
Mm.
I did pick so like the topic that I was somewhat more familiar with, and I feel the research would be practical to do.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that is basically part of the reason why, why I picked it. But also because I was in the sense that it's something that I've had contact with, hand clothing. It's something that I have had contact before. It's something that some of my friends are into, and it's something that's also related to China, right? Which I've always thought and still do feel that, um, as far as anthropology is concerned, it's somewhat, you could say, less studied than it should. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Chinese society. Um, there's so much to talk about, but there's just not as much scholarship as there should be. There is a lot, but not as much. So I was feeling like I could contribute to that. I could contribute to that. So I picked a topic that I feel I could contribute to, that I was interested in, and also was just happens to be something that and
Mm.
that's I think why I picked it. No, in hindsight, I would have picked a different topic. I feel like that, maybe something with bioanthro, because as you know, in our cohort, there's only you that did bioanthro, and then
Hmm.
most of us just did cultural anthropology. And I do
Right.
think that speaks to just cultural anthropology being a bit more accessible, perhaps, than the
Hmm.
other fields. Um, so yeah, I would have probably, if I had more time, I would have probably thought a bit deeper about it. Maybe I'd have come up with a different topic. I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I love your project. And actually the people who I went to our conference with, they said that your project in particular, there was a few, but yours is one of them that like really stood out to them that they thought was really interesting. And I am so glad that we have started to get at your research project, which now leads me to ask you if you would share a little bit about what exactly your research project was with Lemelson, and just why you wanted to explore it, which you now have touched on a little bit.
Yeah. So I studied the hand clothing movement, which is a socio-cultural phenomenon in China, but also in Chinese communities abroad, where people, especially younger folks, are trying to bring back traditional Chinese clothing in different eras. Um, and specifically, I'm studying the connection between that kind of clothing and the people who wear it and ideology. And I'm
Mm,
studying, but like, what kind of ideological factors or drives do these people have? What kind of beliefs do they have? And does this clothing have some kind of ideology? And that is my research question when I set out to answer. I did find, of course, that there's a lot of ideology in that movement, in that hand clothing. Um, it is a very, you could say, culturally potent piece of clothing, but it is also very complicated. And it's very
mhm,
complicated because people put their own, they have their own interpretations of it, so that you don't get really one answer, and there's just a lot of um, debate even within the community itself, and there's a lot of disagreement over the clothing. So that's basically my research on what I found.
yeah, it was so fun to see this, like your project grow, especially because the home clothing movement wasn't something that I was very familiar with at all before, like doing this program for 2 years and obviously interacting with you and your project for so long. I feel like now I have this deep insight into something that now I'm like, this is so important and there
Hmm?
should be so much scholarship on it.
And
Um,
you're an expert now.
so I'm curious, was there anything about your research project or even just the research process that stood out to you? This could be like a result or like conducting the research yourself, any challenges, anything that jumps out to you that maybe people wouldn't expect.
Hmm. You think about it.
Hmm.
Well, one thing that stood out is sort of like how time consuming it could be, I guess. It took a lot of time, and
Thank you for saying
not
that, because
something
yes.
not something that I was prepared for. So
Hmm.
it's not that this is not the what's it called? It's not the best part of research, so to speak. It's a difficult process. It's a
Hmm.
difficult process. It requires a lot of effort and time, and certainly like it's a big commitment. So it's not just about like the time you spend in writing or doing all that stuff, but it's just like how many things you have to do to be able to do it right. You have to consider all the time you're spending on researching the topic beforehand, on doing the literature and on writing notes on these literature too, right? The interviews themselves take a lot of time, and then the part after the interview takes even longer, right? Um, so there's a lot of process that's involved in research. It's not just a singular process, but rather a complex process with a lot of different moving parts. That's something that I would say surprised me. I don't think I was really at first, initially quite knew what I was getting myself into. I don't think many people were. But you make the best out of it, which is sort of also the lesson you learn from. Go in there and it's like, oh, I don't know, but you keep going and eventually you get at it. So that's something that I think stood out to me.
Yeah, I feel like we saw kind of everyone at one point throughout the 2 years hit some big wall, where it was like
Everybody did, exactly.
everyone did,
I
I
remember.
remember. Oh, you go, you go.
Well, yeah, we both remember like the kind of occasions when someone or when most people were really stuck on something. And many conversations I've had, people were just saying, "Oh, I don't know." Like at some point, it became almost kind of like a running joke of just trying, just each of us comparing how behind we were. But I got literally like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, um, when we were just about to submit the presentation, I was getting a text message from someone else in the group who was asking me, "Hey, I'm really behind, and I know you're really behind too. So, tell me how behind you are so that I can feel better." So I said,
Oh
"Yes,
my
don't
God.
worry. No matter how behind you feel you are, I'm definitely more.
Oh my gosh.
You're definitely fine." I was trying to encourage her.
That is
So
incredible.
like it became at some point just so like each of us complaining about things, but it's just in these kind of difficult under these kind of circumstances, I have to sort of try to make the best out of it, and that's almost serving as a kind of encouragement for each of us to keep going,
Yes.
because you're not that. No, don't despair, because everybody is struggling, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
Get out of
I I was completely surprised like by the same thing because I remember the group of seniors like in the year above us. They were like, became so close. We bonded so much. There will be tears. There will be suffering. And I was like, wow, these people put a lot of pressure on themselves. Like that,
exactly.
wow. And then you get there and it was just this shared experience of like, we're all doing things that we really care about. And this is so hard. Like this shared like suffering experience, people being like, oh my God. I remember there was one assignment like this year that nobody really knew about. And then we got like an email and like half the class didn't do it. Just like, I don't know if you remember that, but just random, like random experiences where everybody was like really behind. But what was interesting to me is I feel like people hit that wall at different times. Like I feel like in the first year when it was like the literature review and writing the methods, at least for me, I was like, I felt relatively on top of things. Like I kind of knew what I was doing. I still felt like I knew what I was getting myself into. And then starting like the summer and forward with like data collection and actually doing the project, I hit like so many walls and it took months to get IRB approval, like all these things. And that's when I hit my wall. But I know like different people had challenges at different times. That I love the text. I did not know that. That you heard
Yeah, it's
that from
just
people.
like I was I was also struggling at that moment, so it was nice to
Yeah.
receive a message to hear about someone else who's also, the joke they say is that you know, if you're late to class, the best thing, the best thing you can see is someone else who's also late to class, or even better, you see the professor who's also late to class.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what you want to see when you're yourself when you're running late. It's the same idea. It's like it's good to know it's ironic, but it's good to know that you're not the only, that you're
No.
not left behind. But
Mm-hmm.
rather, like there are other people who are in there with you, and they're also still struggling with the same things. So
Oh yeah.
it's that kind of thing that keeps you going. That idea that
Mm-hmm.
like we can do this together, rather
Totally.
than I am completely behind, everybody else is so on things, and I'm screwed. It's
Yeah.
cool, right?
And
What's
it
the point?
was,
But yeah,
yeah.
it's like
No, I could
that's
agree. I felt like nobody put on the front that was like, oh, like I have it all together. Like when people didn't know what was happening in their project, I felt like people were pretty transparent about it. We would have these like weekly check-ins with the professors. Be like, all right, everyone update us on your project. And some people would be like, I literally did no work this week. Or, like, or it's midterms or what, and it would happen to everybody. Or oh, I made very little progress or I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve, and just having like the shared community and support system. Like it's hard to imagine doing anthropology without that kind of a support system, I will admit.
I
So,
imagine it,
mhm.
it's otherwise like lonely.
Yeah.
Need that. You need
Because it's true, like you are the only one who really mastered your topic, obviously. And like obviously we had a community
no,
of
that's
people.
true.
Well,
Don't you see?
to some extent, right?
I feel like everyone is. I was also interesting that you brought it up because I was also sharing actually Elena um that she wasn't so sure about the presentation, and
Hmm.
I just said, you know what, you did the research,
Yeah.
on
Yeah, she
your
killed it.
topic, right, on this whole
Hmm.
on everything like that, and you did all that stuff. You talked to the people, you did the literature, you did the history. Um, so by all means, you are the expert on that field, right? And when you walk into that room, you have to believe that you are the one who knows the most about your topic,
Hmm.
right? And that everyone else in that room at that moment, they are your students, right? They don't know as much about it.
Yeah.
So you have the authority, right? You can speak from a position of authority that you know what you're talking about, right? So, right, it's everyone. What the good thing about research is that when you go through all that loops, and there's a lot of loops to jump through, um,
Hmm.
you can be confident about your knowledge, right? It's not just a feeling that you have, or a speculation, something you heard about, but rather it's something that you've seen and you've done the research on, and it's something that you know. Right? And that is a very good feeling, and that is a lot of authority. So yeah,
Yeah, it's a cool
I do
thing to have people look to you for information. I
exactly.
feel like as students, you don't always get the opportunity to do that. So I love that you touched on that.
So yeah, being able so everyone is an expert in their field now, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, which is incredible. So yeah, well, thank you. I haven't even like thought about it like that, but I love like now I'm
And
going to think about it like
you
that.
definitely know more than like I do, and you definitely know more than anyone else in the
Oh yeah,
when it
absolutely
comes to
on
your
your
specific.
topic.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, you know, everyone's a master in their fields.
It's awesome. It's such a huge perk too of anthro in general, or these like highly specific research fields, which is so awesome. The next thing that I wanted to ask you, which we touched on briefly, I touched briefly with you before we were recording. So for those who don't know, um, what are you considering doing in the future, related or unrelated to anthropology, related or unrelated to grad school? Do you have any like ideas for what you would want to do maybe a few years down the line?
Yeah, something I think about quite a bit. Um,
Hmm.
so there's like a few paths I think that I can go down, right?
Hmm.
Speaking for myself. Um, One is to continue like studying, um, going to advanced degrees, PhD, and go into essentially research.
Hmm.
And I do think that that's something I would be interested in. I think that there's still just so much to learn, and I'm really curious about these kind of topics, which I have so much research ideas that I could do. Um, and if I do go down research, I would say I would try to sort of, you could say, fan out.
Hmm.
I do think that in terms of social science, they are definitely all interconnected, very much so. And
Mhm.
whenever I talk to anyone else from other fields in social science, and we talk about ideas and stuff, I'm just like, there's so much similarity. There's so much in
Mhm.
common that we can do together. So I'm also very interested in political stuff, in political science, in philosophy, in economy. And so there's a lot that you can sort of put that together. Right? With an anthro perspective and with other things you can mix up together. There's a lot of research of knowledge that you could gain a lot of things. That's one path.
Mhm.
Um, Another is to work in industry. Um, and another is to work in government. Right. So
Mm.
working governments, there's a lot when it comes to public affairs that you can do. With regards to policies, with regards to research, that the government needs to do. So there's that. And then in industry, there's a lot in terms of management, in terms of
Mhm.
business development, in terms of these kind of things, HR, in terms of um, outreach that you
Mhm.
can, and these are also topics. These are also fields where anthropology can come in handy. And right, the last thing is to again not to be limited by what you studied in your undergraduate, right? And try to keep your eyes open and keep your options, right? You can also go to grad school in other fields.
Mhm.
I'm also considering things such as law school that potentially I could do, right? Because I'm also interested in law.
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of options.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that's
Yeah,
honestly one of the biggest questions that I get is what kinds of jobs can you get like after anthropology? Like what can you do after? And it's honestly a hard question to answer
both of them.
because yeah, people do like everything. Like people are
Mhm.
pre-med. Like you get a BS in anthropology and you can go to med school. You get a B&A in anthropology and you go to law school. You get your PhD, you go into industry, you go into politics, economics. Like it seems endless. So I love asking people this question because like there's I don't know, I feel like there's so much to know and so many different possibilities and it's not really talked about that much like within anthropology like as a field, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very curious to see what you end up deciding because I feel like it's definitely not the worst problem in the world to have a lot of interests. I have the same problem and it's challenging to tie myself down to one thing, you know, but I'm like at
I-
least I have interests, like at least
yeah.
I'm open.
It's the same thing. I I have so much that I want to do that
Mhm.
I just don't know that I have enough time on earth to be able to do all of those things.
Exactly. Right? I'm like, so if I
That's
want to do this and this and this and this, how do I do it all without like not giving 100% to everything,
yeah,
And it's like you can't do
it's
it
tough.
all. It's
It's
tough.
tough.
Yeah. I think it just depends a little bit on like luck and where you find yourself and the opportunities that present themselves. It's hard. But hey, at least it's like, hey, if you have an opportunity to go to law school, then maybe you'll do that and you find it interesting. If you have an opportunity to go into industry, maybe you'll do that because you also find that interesting. Yeah, so I think that's great. And thank you for touching on like the wide variety of options that anthropologists have. So, because I think that's one of the best things about it. Now, my final thing that I really am so excited to ask people because it's very just like reflective is there anything about anthropology just as a field or your experiences within anthropology that you would want like viewers to know about, like something, a way that anthropology impacted you or anything, just something to share with the world related to anthropology?
Hmm. So I think one of the things that is common to all, like to basically all anthropology subfields, is this phrase that I heard someone once say. Is that
Mhm.
anthropology is the field to where you make the familiar strange and make the strange familiar, right?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
that's really it's less of at that point it's less of an academic field, but think of it more like a perspective.
Mhm.
Is that everything we do in anthropology is to look at something that people do or did in the case of archaeology, right? Or even bioanthropology. Look at
Yeah.
something that people do or did, um, and say, well, let's delve deeper into this, right? We do not take things for granted. We don't take things at face value. You don't look at it and say, okay, this is because of this and this is because of that. You have to ask everything. You have to break everything apart, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking in terms of, in engineering or just for that matter, kids who like to break apart toys and see how they work. In anthropology, it's the same thing. We take
Mhm.
apart behavior, we take apart systems, and we take apart the societies to try to see the fundamental working parts that when you put together, somehow it makes it work. Right?
Mhm.
That's really what I love the most about anthropology as a field. It's just this spirit of this inquisitiveness or this unwillingness to just sit there and then accept the world as is, right? We have to try to understand it more, try to delve deeper and try to come up with explanation. Um, so that's something that goes way beyond, as I said, just an academic field. It's something that you apply in life, right? It's something that is this curiosity, this uncompromising pursuit of truth, so to speak, right? It's something that you can apply to anything. It's something that you develop um, into just a habit that
Mhm.
everything everything you see, you try to understand it. You try to learn more about it. And this, I think, is really powerful. And that's why, as I said in the beginning, that I don't want to trade it for anything. I trade my field. Right? No, even though I think about all the other things that I want to do and I'm interested in doing, I just think that this perspective is so unique, so powerful that um, it's really given me such a whole new world to explore, right? That has built on top of everything that I have already learned and has given me the tools to understand and learn even more about it. So that's really the opposite takeaway from ology um,
Yeah.
as a field.
That was incredible. I've heard that something along those lines before said about anthropology and this nature to want to take everything apart. And obviously, I relate to that very deeply. And it reminds me of another thing that I've heard before about how I feel like anthropology makes everything so uniquely human, right? Like you can study anything, right? But anthropology is the bridge between something and understanding how it impacts humans and how we impact like whatever that thing is. And so to hear you talk about how like all we want to do is just break things apart, break things down, understand why certain people are impacted by certain things, is just so valuable to me, to you, and to like all the other amazing people who have studied and will study anthropology. So thank you so much for those are all the questions that I have prepared for you today. So thank you so so much for being here and again taking the time out of your weekend before finals to do this interview with me.
Thank you for having this amazing YouTube channel and also for bringing this thing out to everybody. You're doing very very amazing work and very important.
Oh, thank you. I just frustrating. I'm like, why anthropology is the best, and everyone deserves to know that anthropology is the best. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, thank you so much for being here. I am gonna stop this recording, and then I will talk to you in literally like 2 seconds. But to anyone watching this, if you guys have any questions for me or for Derrick, definitely leave them in the comment section down below, and I will make sure they get answered by the both of us. So, thank you so much for watching, and Derrick, I'll talk to you in a second.